Paul Heyman got his face slapped off on live television, and nobody is talking about what actually led to that moment. They're all focused on the arrest. They're all focused on Seth Rollins being dragged out of the building in handcuffs like a criminal. But let me tell you something right now, if you think Seth Rollins was wrong for what he did last night on Raw, you need to stay on this video, because by the time I'm done, you're going to realize that not only was Seth completely justified, the real question is why didn't he do it sooner? Because Paul Heyman has been hiding behind Roman Reigns, behind the bloodline, behind lawyers, behind authority figures, and behind the greasy smirk of his for years. And last night? Last night the chickens finally came home to roost. Seth Rollins walked up to the most untouchable man in WWE, the self-proclaimed special counsel, the wisest man in the room, and he put his hands on him. And I was sitting at home screaming at my screen because it was one of the most satisfying moments I have seen on Raw in a long time. So buckle up. Drop a comment right now telling me, was Seth right or was Seth wrong? I want to see that comment section exploding before I even finish this video. Let's get into it. Segment 1, setting the stage, what happened leading into this moment. To understand why Seth Rollins completely lost it on Raw, you have to understand the weeks of psychological warfare that Paul Heyman has been running, because that's what Heyman does. He doesn't throw punches. He doesn't take bumps. He doesn't bleed for this business. What Paul Heyman does, and he does it better than anyone alive, is he gets inside your head. He plants seeds. He waters them with manipulation, fertilizes them with half-truths, and then stands back and watches you self-destruct while he brushes lint off his suit jacket. For weeks now, Heyman has been doing exactly that to Seth Rollins. Little digs during promos, sly comments on social media, veiled threats wrapped in that eloquent, almost poetic way he speaks where you almost forget he's threatening you because the words are so beautiful. But Seth Rollins is not stupid. Seth Rollins has been in this business long enough to know exactly what Paul Heyman is. He's a snake. The most dangerous kind, the one that smiles while it bites you. And the tension had been building for weeks. Every time Seth tried to get a straight answer about the Bloodline's plans for him, Heyman would deflect. Every time Seth demanded respect, Heyman would give him a condescending smile and a non-answer. Every time Seth tried to draw a line, Heyman would elegantly step over it and dare Seth to do something about it. Last Monday on Raw, Seth had clearly decided he was done playing games. He came to the arena with something in his eyes that regular Seth Rollins fans will recognize immediately, that quiet, terrifying calm before the visionary absolutely explodes. He wasn't bouncing around. He wasn't doing the theatrical entrance energy. He was locked in. And anyone who's followed Seth's career knows when he gets quiet, something is about to happen. Segment 2, the confrontation, moment-by-moment breakdown. Seth found Heyman backstage. Not in the ring. Not during a scheduled segment. Backstage. Which tells you everything about Seth's mindset. He wasn't looking for a moment for the crowd. He was looking for a conversation. A real one. Man to man. No cameras scripted to be there, no referee, no authority figure positioned conveniently nearby. Heyman, to his credit or discredit, depending on how you look at it, did not run. He stood there. Because Heyman is many things, but he is not physically cowardly. His cowardice is entirely of the moral and ethical variety. He stood his ground, that signature smirk on his face, and he started doing what he always does. He started talking. And the words that came out of Paul Heyman's mouth in that moment, I'm not going to repeat all of it because frankly I think it was designed to provoke, and I don't want to give it more oxygen. But what Heyman essentially did was remind Seth in that calm, devastating Heyman way that Seth is not on Roman Reigns' level. That Seth has never beaten Roman clean. That Seth's entire career, all the championships, all the legendary matches, all the critically acclaimed moments, none of it puts him in the same conversation as the tribal chief. And Heyman delivered this with a smile. With warmth, almost. Like he was doing Seth a favor by being honest with him. And Seth listened. He let Heyman finish. He stood there, jaw tight, breathing controlled, and he let every single word land. And then Seth Rollins slapped Paul Heyman so hard the sound echoed down the hallway. The place erupted. Crew members scattered. Cameras that were in the vicinity caught it from multiple angles. Heyman stumbled back, hand going to his face, and for the first time in perhaps years, Paul Heyman looked genuinely shocked. The mask slipped. The smirk was gone. For one beautiful, raw, human moment Paul Heyman looked afraid. And Seth wasn't done. Before anyone could react, before the agents and producers who were always hovering around Heyman could intervene, Seth grabbed him by the lapels of that expensive suit and connected with a right hand that put Heyman into the wall. Not a worked punch. Not a pulled punch. A real, angry, I have had enough punch that crumpled Heyman where he stood. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Segment 3, the aftermath, the arrest. Within minutes, and I mean minutes, WWE officials were involved. And here's where things get interesting, because this is where the story stops being about Seth's anger and starts being about something much more calculated and political. Security was called immediately. Local law enforcement that works the arena was brought in. And I want you to think hard about who had the motive and the means to make this happen so quickly. Someone decided to press charges. Now, in professional wrestling, talent puts their hands on each other all the time. It's a physical business. Altercations backstage happen more than the public ever knows about. In virtually every single one of those cases, it is handled internally. Fines, suspensions, creative consequences. You don't call the police on a fellow performer in the middle of a Raw taping unless you want to escalate this into something much bigger. Unless you want that person humiliated. Unless you want a narrative, a legal one that you can use against them going forward. Paul Heyman didn't just get hit. Paul Heyman made a choice after he got hit. And that choice tells you everything about the kind of man Paul Heyman really is. Seth Rollins was escorted in handcuffs, in front of cameras, in front of his colleagues, in front of the entire production out of the arena. People were filming on their phones. It was being broadcast on the live feed. And Seth, to his absolute credit, walked out with his head held high. No struggling. No shouting. He looked at the cameras, he looked at the arena, and he walked out like a man who has zero regrets about what he did. That image. Seth Rollins in handcuffs, being walked out of a Raw taping. That image is going to live in WWE history. The question is, what story does it end up telling? Segment 4: the deeper story, why this matters more than people realize. Let's talk about what this really means for the landscape of WWE right now, because I think a lot of people are getting distracted by the spectacle and missing the substance. Seth Rollins is arguably the most consistent performer on the Raw roster over the past several years. World Heavyweight Champion. The man who main event WrestleMania. The man who has had 5-star matches with seemingly every credible opponent on the roster. The man who shows up every single week, delivers, and never gives less than everything he has. And Paul Heyman has spent months treating him like a footnote. That's the real story here. This isn't just about one confrontation. This is about a top-tier performer being systematically disrespected by a faction's mouthpiece, with zero consequences until Seth made his own consequences. And now the entire system is coming down on Seth for daring to push back. Think about the message that sends. Think about what it means for everyone else in that locker room watching this unfold. If Seth Rollins, one of the most decorated, most respected names in that building, can be publicly humiliated, dismissed, and then criminally charged for finally retaliating, what does that say about how protected Paul Heyman and the Bloodline really are? This is deeper than a wrestling angle, people. This is about power. About who actually runs things. And the fact that law enforcement was called so efficiently, so quickly, almost like it was anticipated, that sends a chill down my spine. Was this a setup? Did Heyman push Seth knowing Seth would eventually snap? Did he bait this entire situation so he could have Seth legally removed from the equation before Seth could do something that actually damaged the Bloodline's plans? I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm saying Paul Heyman is the smartest man in professional wrestling. And smart men don't get hit without having already planned what happens next. Segment 5: what comes next, predictions and the road forward. Here's where I want to get speculative, because this is where it gets really exciting. Seth Rollins is not going to disappear. He cannot be arrested into irrelevance. Whatever charges may or may not be filed, whatever suspension WWE hands down internally, Seth Rollins is going to come back. And when he comes back, this story is going to be at a completely different temperature than it is right now. Because right now it's a fire. When Seth comes back, it's going to be a volcano. The most interesting angle to me, and the one I think they're building toward, is whether or not this becomes the catalyst for Seth to go to a place we've never really seen him go before. Full, unambiguous, morally complex anti-hero. Seth has danced on the edge of this before. The Authority days, the early Bloodline adjacent storyline moments. But this? Getting arrested? Being walked out of Raw in handcuffs? That changes a person. That changes a character. And Seth Rollins is one of the best character performers in this generation. Give him that fuel and watch what he does with it. Meanwhile, Paul Heyman. Here's the thing about Heyman that I don't think gets enough credit. He is at his absolute best when he's been wounded. When he's been embarrassed. Because embarrassment is fuel for Paul Heyman the same way rage is fuel for Seth Rollins. Heyman is going to come back from this slap with a plan. Something meticulous. Something layered. Something that makes you forget all about the slap, because what happens next is so much worse. And Roman Reigns lurks over all of this. Whether Roman is present on screen or operating from a distance, this situation has tribal chief fingerprints all over it. Is Roman pulling Heyman's strings on this? Was this always going to end with Seth Rollins being neutralized? And most importantly, does Seth know that? Because if Seth figures out that he was maneuvered into this, that the slap was the plan all along, the rage we saw last Monday is nothing. Nothing compared to what comes next. Segment 6: final thoughts, the verdict. So was Seth Rollins right? Was he wrong? Morally, yeah, you don't put your hands on someone. In the real world, outside these ropes, outside these cameras, putting your hands on someone has consequences, and Seth Rollins knows that better than anyone now. But emotionally? As someone who has watched Seth Rollins pour blood, sweat, and sacrifice into this business, only to be talked down to by a man who hasn't taken a bump in years? Who sits ringside looking smug while actual athletes risk their bodies every single week? Emotionally, I popped louder than I have in months. Paul Heyman has had that coming. And the fact that the system immediately weaponized itself against Seth, the handcuffs, the police, the public humiliation, makes me angrier, not less sympathetic to Seth. Because that's what power does. It protects itself. Even when it's wrong. Especially when it's wrong. Seth Rollins slapped Paul Heyman. And they arrested Seth Rollins. Let that sink in. Drop a comment right now. Are you riding with Seth, or do you think he crossed a line he can't uncross? Share this video because I guarantee your wrestling friends have opinions on this, and I want this debate everywhere. Hit subscribe if you're new. Ring Rumble 1 is where we don't just recap the story, we break it down, we go deeper, and we never flinch from the real conversation. Seth Rollins is not done. Not even close.